the switch was flipped. So the combination of what the world needs, what you love, what you're good at. I have panic attacks regularly. That isn't a duvet day, figure shit out. Unlearn that story.
Welcome to Leadership Herding Cats. This week is part 2 with Sam Ferris, recruitment consultant turned decorating contractor. Sam told us about the extreme burnout he experienced, which led to physical shaking and cold sweats. This week we discuss ways that you can avoid a similar situation. Please help us along the way though, and share this episode with one person you feel will benefit from it.
Leadership, it can be just like herding cats. Ever tried that before?
And actually, I'm effectively running another business now. It's a painter and decorator. But it's a very, very different kind of business. The pressure isn't there in the same way. And I ended up, through a friend of a friend, meeting somebody who runs a very high-end decorating company. And I worked on a couple of large projects with them to start with, to get my, I suppose, my brush wet again, so to speak, and get up to date on exactly what all of the latest, technology was in terms of dust-free sanding systems and so forth that weren't there when I was working in the industry. And getting to that point of, relearning the finer points in terms of the fine prep and the fine finishing before I got out and started out on my own projects again.
But with with this taking the step from the previous business to that business and kind of breaking that cycle of your day to day, was it like just sort of flick a switch and move on, or did you?
It's a death. A part of you has to die.
Yeah.
And that's a process of letting go.
Yeah.
And how that can manifest itself in terms of being able to let go of that took me a couple of psychedelic journeys. It took me the help and support from friends in terms of being able to talk through options and being able to bounce ideas around, and those are people who are important to you. And then the switch was flipped. The opportunity came to go and work freelancing, subcontracting to start with, and it was like, well, okay, I'll earn more than enough doing that, and I'm in the position that I've still got that ticking. I've still got the old business ticking over in the background in the meantime.
Yeah.
And I got back on it and thought, why the hell did I ever stop doing this? Why the hell have I wasted 15 years plus going to university and working in the corporate landscape?
If you could say one thing to your younger self, what would that be?
I'm going to give a relatively existential answer to that and say, forget the concept of yourself, the grasping ego, the grasping in the aversions, and very Vedic or Buddhist-like philosophy.
Yeah.
Realize that we are not the self that we think that we are, and stop hunting out a lifestyle of what seems to gratify that ego or a personal sense of self.
Yeah. Because something that kind of resonated with me that you said in the beginning is obviously it's the conditioning, it's the social conditioning of how we feel or what we feel we should be achieving and how we should be judging ourselves, really. And I think, as you said, you're a dad, you're a parent, the same as, I'm sure you feel the same as me. You kind of think, especially going through this, you kind of think you don't want your children to do that. And I quite often worry now, my kids are 10 and 6, and I look at them and I think, I don't want them to get into that vicious cycle. I think it's probably tougher for younger kids these days. They certainly seem to be under a lot more mental stress for whatever reason. So it's kind of whether or not you would do things differently if you had the information that you had now, and potentially not go through what you've been through?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't have gone back to university. I would have not bought into the lie that university is what we need in order to progress in life and
Yeah.
be able to get to the point where, you know, we have what we have been socially conditioned to be, you know, a successful, okay point, you know, with a 4-bedroom detached house with 2 cars in the driveway and 2 foreign holidays a year, and that's what success is.
Mm.
And, you know, unlearn that story.
Yeah. What would you say would be your best bit of advice getting to someone that's getting close to burnout, if they're feeling that they're getting somewhere near?
Be ready to let go of everything,
Right.
in terms of the structure of your life as you know it, but know that in doing so that it will turn out for the best in the end.
Yeah.
But be prepared for huge amounts of upheaval in your life to change what you need to change in order to put yourself into a position where you're not susceptible to burnout again.
Yeah. Do you feel that radical change is the only way to stop it?
Yeah. I mean, that could be a radical change just in terms of mindset shift, but I think realistically, if a mindset shift, if a complete paradigm shift about how one views every aspect of their life isn't possible, then I think the entire structure of the life needs to be torn down and rebuilt.
Yeah.
And I think there's a big industry in people coaching, in people writing books, in people in all of this stuff about the aspects of burnout.
Mm.
And I think that in many ways perpetuates the problem, because it's suggesting that actually, in many cases, you don't need to change so many things, you just need to adapt slightly. And I think that just perpetuates the problem in the cycle for people.
Yeah, and I suppose, playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, you know, I'm the type of person that kind of pushes mental strengths and conditioning, if you like, in the sense of, if you've got the right mindset, you can kind of get through. But from what you're saying, that's very dangerous.
Yeah. The right mindset's important still, but the right mindset is going to be what you perceive is the right mindset. Might just other people's minds don't work necessarily in that way. This is the whole being able to let go of self and desire and ego, and, you know, what goals are we working to? Are they material goals that actually just going to leave us feeling like, okay, well, yeah, okay, I managed to upgrade my 530D this year, but I actually a month later after driving it, it's still just another car. Yeah, that's the goal that I was working for in order to achieve that, because I wanted to achieve X at work, and I knew that I would reward myself by doing Y with a new car. But ultimately, all of those things in terms of motivations are just filling a hole that can't be filled, because then it's just, okay, it's just another car. What am I going to search for next? I think the motivation needs to be intrinsic. There needs to be a purpose to what you're doing. There needs to be, in what way are you offering service that gives you a feeling of value, and one where you feel like you're adding something to other people's lives.
Yeah.
By being able to forget the self whilst doing that work. And that's where the sustainable motivation comes from, not just think positive, you know, think motivated, be goal orientated, you know, and you're going to get through it. I think that's a slippery slope, personally.
That kind of begs the question whether or not asking yourself why, you know, what are your reasons for doing what you're doing, and, you know, if anything can be changed to make that easier, relieve the pressure, I suppose, as much as anything else, doesn't it? Because the reason why has to be at the core of what you're doing, isn't it? And like you say, if it's all about the money, are you going to burn out quicker if there's another reason? Do you feel trapped?
The Japanese concept of ikigai. So the combination of what the world needs, what you love, what you're good at, and what you can be paid for. There's the ideal vocation, and that is your ikigai.
Which makes sense.
But I don't think you can't shoehorn an existing job into.
No. Always good fun as usual. I'm just double checking we're still recording, which we are. Yeah, but so I suppose that begs the question. Although that fits right, it still comes down to the fact that if you're doing something or you believe you're doing something for the passion, but it's boxing you into a corner potentially financially or some other restriction, you can still overinvest. It's knowing that it's trying to identify that time where actually you're getting to that point of the mental strain, isn't it, really? Because there could well be another reason for you going through that sort of mental strain and that vicious cycle.
Combination of it. It could be the combination of everything going on in life and what's happened in the past as well, in terms of triggers that have brought that up. I think most of us can run around with feeling like our bodies are just things that walk our heads around, because it's our heads that do the thinking, and that's what we need in order to make money and do a job.
Yeah.
I think, well, not all jobs, but I think being able to turn that off and be more in the body, and be able to, work out in the morning, do some yoga, work out how do I feel in my body, where's the tension, is my nervous system, my emotional nervous system regulated, am I calm, am I feeling a little bit stressed, what can I do to re-regulate myself now before I then pick up the next step, and then be a little bit more intentional with that next step, even if it means that you are, I don't know, you're as a business owner starting half an hour later than you would, because that extra half an hour spent re-regulating your body with the cold shower, meditation, whatever is needed, is going to be more productive afterwards, rather than chaining yourself to a desk with expectations that you're always going to perform in exactly the same way.
So I suppose being more aware of your current situation, and like you say, sort of making sure that you are aware of how the body and the mind is feeling, and making sure your day is structured to a degree that enables you to keep that in a good position, is a potential way to avoid a similar situation or burnout in a degree, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Potentially. And so you said obviously you spoke to family and people that are close to you to kind of help out the situation. How did they sort of react to your situation? How did it?
Let's not go down that route in terms of conversation. Happy to have that conversation offline.
No, that's fine. Did you speak to anyone else? Is it a case of did you feel like there was a sense of relief as soon as you sort of stepped away and you'd identified that there was a problem with what you were doing? Or did you have to go through that process to identify it?
I identified that there was a problem, but I felt trapped and that I had no choice but to continue going despite it being problematic.
Yeah. And I suppose, so going into the decorating then, as you've got into that, was that, as you said, sort of therapeutic, that got you back into
working with my body, back into genuine flow states on a regular basis, Having something that I'm producing that I can throw my love into as a project and make every project a labor of love, where you're delivering, a beautiful end product as a finishing trade for your client, and knowing that it's going to be enjoyed for the quality of it, rather than how quickly you've slapped some paint on the walls.
Yeah.
It's something that's incredibly rewarding. So it's a rewarding, here's a before and after. It's also incredibly rewarding therapeutically, just as the journey of taking it there as well. Because if you can be just completely in the moment for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah. And you touched on earlier, you saying about obviously how there's lots of coaches and people working to help mindset and helping people to avoid burnout. You didn't sound very complimentary of that.
No, I don't think that's fair. I think there's an industry around it that definitely exists. I think there's very few coaches out there who are any good at what they do. I think it's just a Pareto principle of 80-20. 80% out of them out there are pretty crap, and there'll be 20% out there who are absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
But the problem is as a consumer, when you're looking for one, how the hell do you know what kind of coach you're going to go and get?
Before we dive too deep into this week's podcast, I want to tell you a little bit about our sponsors, which is Vapor Clean Commercial Cleaning Services. Vapor Clean provides commercial contract cleaning throughout the Southwest. If you run a business with premises that need cleaning on a daily basis, then we can provide that service for you regularly, sufficiently, and consistently to the highest standard. We provide trained professional operatives that are audited and supported the right way, making sure you have the highest standards all year round. So if you want to know more, get in touch. But for now, back to the podcast.
So you could be really lucky and you could end up with a really good coach, but you could end up with a bad coach and be in the situation of, well, coaching clearly doesn't work. That was a terrible experience. It's kind of, you've got to potentially be willing to kiss a lot of frogs in terms of coaches before you actually find the right one. And I think that can be quite a disheartening experience for a lot of people.
Quite disheartening, and I suppose as well, it's it can be quite detrimental as well, can it? If you get the wrong coach, that is which is the same as anything. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you could go and get the wrong solicitor that doesn't know what they're doing when you're trying to sell or buy a house, couldn't you? But if you get the wrong coach and you are struggling with burnout or something like that already, that could send you the wrong way or put even more pressure on, doesn't it? Because you obviously needed to make that change, a very radical change. But if you've got a coach that's telling you, persevere, make sure and do this and take some time for yourself, and that's not enough for someone, I mean, dare you think about how bad it could have been if you didn't make that change?
Yeah. I mean, you're getting into the realms of, I don't, when you're dealing with burnout, I think, and you're dealing with mindset coaching around burnout, I think unless you've been to that point before, you're not in a position that you're qualified to coach somebody on that.
Yeah. To me, that's quite often the point of the sort of thing of a coach you're looking for, aren't you? You're looking for the experience that they've had to help you through
absolutely
whatever situation it is. But
and it's just like you don't want to hire the personal trainer that's a fatso. You want to hire the personal trainer that actually looks like they are getting the results for themselves.
Yeah. So is there sort of any part of the change that you've made that you now regret, or are you completely happy that you made your change?
I'm completely and utterly happy with my change. I should have done it. I should have done it years ago.
Yeah. What would be your advice to someone that is sort of listening to this now then and thinking, I'm already there, what do I do?
Stop, take some time, go away, out of your life, out of your routine, go and stay in an Airbnb, something very minimalist, and work out which element of your life is causing you the most pain and what you can do to remedy that, being willing to throw part of your life away.
Okay.
Like,
This might be a question. Sorry, Karen.
Leaving nothing on the table. What is it that is getting you to that point that you're not managing? Identify that and then resolve it.
Yeah.
Even though that might be a very bitter and difficult pill to swallow.
Yeah. This might be a question that you might not want to answer, and obviously no pressure for you to answer it, but I'm kind of obviously trying to put myself in that circumstance and thinking, well, if I was feeling that way, what would I do? What is it that would stop me? And frankly, it would be probably the same fears that you had. You know, I've got a mortgage to pay, I've got 2 kids at home, I've got bills going out every day, so it would probably be the money and the fear of everything I would lose. How did you kind of, because I'm just thinking this would be the most useful thing for people, how did you kind of stop without that tap turning off?
I started to look. Well, I was able to stop because I was in a very lucky position in terms of the fact that I was running the business. There's been a cash balance in it that's been okay. I'm being able to continue sourcing work for that particular business to ensure some continued income. I won't be able to pay myself as much from that business longer term, but in the shorter term, that business put me in a position due to the cash balance on it and the fact that I was still working in that business, setting up these new processes to keep it afloat, in terms of the outsourcing and so forth. That I've effectively been in the lucky position that I've been able to continue paying myself a smaller salary whilst being in the position that I'm also earning from painting and decorating.
For me, I'm sitting here thinking, if someone's in that situation where they're feeling that bad and they know they need to get out, then, you know, the world's not going to crumble within a day or two. You're saying the most useful thing they can do is step away, take some time for themselves.
Yeah.
Even if it's just go to sleep in a B&B for a few nights.
Sure.
So
but going to sleep in Airbnbs with the intent of spending that internal reflection time alone to work out which aspects of the life that they know needs to be let go of.
Yeah, and that's what I was just about to say. So would you kind of agree that, you know, let's say they took a day to go and actually just physically rest the body, but then potentially or the body and the mind, but have a day aside where they can sit down, work out what their priorities are, and potentially even work out how they can scale it back? Because anyone's situation is going to be slightly different to yours, if not completely different. But there's probably a way out somehow. It's just taking the time to figure out.
That time isn't a day. A day of physical. I mean, when I was in that situation, I was completely useless, and that was a process that took weeks and months.
Was it?
Yeah, that's not, you know, that isn't a duvet day, figure shit out. That's takes some time completely out and really reassess absolutely everything in a very deep level, whilst trying to give your body some rest to let its energy restore from its, you know, it's not being completely out of whack.
No. I did notice the look on your face, and it did look a bit like you were kind of saying you're a patronising twat. It wasn't meant in that way, but
I just
the
thought
concept, maybe not the timing.
I was just thinking, oh, typical corporate boss. He's just saying, oh yeah, my staff member's a bit stressed. I'll give him a duvet day. It'll be all right. That's all you need, love.
That wasn't my intention. I can promise you that. Definitely not. Maybe my timing's not right, but the concept, because if they've got to make that decision, and that, because what you're saying is make it sooner rather than later, aren't you? Make that decision sooner rather than later.
It becomes a balance then. How do you know that you're not going through a rough patch and things are going to improve?
Yeah. And
you just don't have any staying power. And how do you know that you're at the point where you're at burnout? And I think, those aren't questions that I feel qualified to answer in terms of actually defining those points. And I think that they're probably slightly different for everybody, but there's definitely a very careful balance to be looked at there to really work out, is this just a bit of a tough, stressful spot that I'm going to pull through and things going to be all right again, or is there actually something more seriously wrong?
Which is why I think, taking the time, stepping away and taking the time is maybe not a day, but taking the time is probably the one thing that has to be done, isn't it? They've got to have a look at something. Because it's even when you're just running a business, if you're sat in your office all day trying to solve problems that are there, you can never quite focus them. If you walk away and focus on one particular thing, it tends to make it easier. Not easy, but easier. So yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer, and to be honest with you, I completely agree with you. I don't feel that I'm qualified in any way, shape or form to be given a definitive answer on it, but I'm
waking up every single morning at about 6 o'clock, sometimes as early as 4 o'clock, with my whole body physically writhing and shaking with anxiety. I felt like I couldn't focus on anything. I felt weak, out of control. I'd have panic attacks regularly. They'd get so exhausting that I burst into tears. If you hit that point, that's the point that what you're doing is wrong. That's as far as I'm going to say. Again, everybody's going to be slightly different in terms of their levels of sensitivity, in terms of what they can deal with, and their resilience, what they can't deal with. But I know in my case, if I'd reached that point, that's more than time to go.
That's a very clear cut. It's time to make a massive change.
Yeah.
Sam, on that note, I'm going to thank you very much for your time and the bravery for sharing your story. I think it will be very useful for a lot of people. So thank you once again for your time. I appreciate that massively.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.
All right, thank you.
Cheers,
Hope to meet you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
I'd like to thank Sam for being so brave in actually sharing that experience. That must be very difficult, and I, for one, can resonate with quite a lot of what he says. And I'm sure a number of you out there can as well. Please do let us know in the comments if you have any tips to help other people avoid burnout or any type of situation similar to Sam's. You can also help us out by liking, subscribing on your chosen platform, or sharing this episode with just one person who you feel may enjoy or benefit from it. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you next week.